All right. So again, welcome. This is PQA Basics Essentials. So this is a 1 hour recap of the full 6 hour version of Program Quality Assessment Basics, which we held last week. So I know some of you have taken the 6 hour version in the past, and you're doing this as a refresher. Maybe it's been a few years, or maybe you couldn't make it to Basics last week. So this is kind of a chance to refresh before we dive into our assessment season. There are a lot of acronyms in this work, so I will try to remember to say them all out um, at least the first few times. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to use the chat or come off mute and just chime in, whichever way works. Feel free to ask questions throughout. So we just did our quick warm welcome. We're going to review our assess, plan, improve process. I'm going to give you an overview of what the program quality assessment is, and then review that observation, note-taking, scoring, and assessment piece. And our goals for today is just understanding this whole process, reminder that it's non-punitive, no stakes attached. This is very much about you collecting data for your own program. I want you to understand how the program quality assessment tool works, what it measures, and then again, um, knowing how to do the observations and scoring. So our Youth Program Quality Initiative, shortened to YPQI, is our assess, plan, improve phases. So in fall, you will conduct an assessment, where this whole training is going to focus on this assess phase today. We're here. So in fall, you're going to do an assessment of your program, either a self-assessment or an external assessment, which we'll talk more about, to collect data about your program. And this data that you're collecting is going to be about what's happening on the program between staff and youth. And then once you have this data collected, you will come to planning with data in winter, either at our pre-conference in Anchorage on November, I think, 17th. So you can either come in person, or we're going to offer it online as well in December. So first step is doing an assessment. Second step is coming to planning with data, where you'll look at the data from your assessment. You'll do some root cause analysis and do some goal setting and kind of get a picture of what maybe some changes you want to make going forward with your program year. And then spring is our improve phase. So January, February, March, we're going to be offering trainings that are aligned with the program quality assessment tool. We'll have coaching supports available and a professional learning community. And then, so you'll be implementing your goals in spring. And then at the end of the school year, you jump back to the assess phase and do a second assessment to really gauge your growth and change throughout the year. And again, our training today is a recap of specifically this assess phase. So I always like to quick ground us in why are we doing this? Sometimes this can feel like an extra lift, an extra thing to do. So I just like to ground us in the importance of what it means to have a high quality out of school time program. And so what you see on the screen are some key features that decades of research have shown lead to positive youth outcomes and building protective factors in youth's lives, which lead to better outcomes. So I'll give you a second to peruse those. If one of them resonates with you, feel free to drop it in the chat. Pick one out that kind of resonates as what is your why for why we do this work? Or if there's one not on the screen too, feel free to mention that as well. Man, this is the third one, supportive relationships. Number 5, positive social norms, appropriate structure. And we're getting a good spread of all of these. Supportive relationships, chance to belong, all of the above. Yes, all of these things are very important. And so what our assessment measures is actually many of these things are intertwined and woven into the program quality assessment tool. So we are able to measure to what level these things are happening in your program. So quick overview of what the PQA is. PQA is Program Quality Assessment. It is essentially a big fat rubric that we'll look at a little bit more. There are a few different versions of it. There is the youth version, which is for approximately grades 5 through 12. And then there's the school age version, which is kind of K through 6. The two tools are extremely similar. There's just a few differences in a few of the items in where they're placed in the tool and some of the wording and an extra item here or there, just to adjust for the age level. But they are very similar tools. And then there's also an organizational quality assessment tool that has a different process that we won't touch on today, but there are a few different tools used. But the two main ones we're using are the youth tool and the school age tool. So it is a validated instrument. It has been being used for decades across the country and across the world even. It is validated, so that means we know that it is measuring what we think it's measuring. If you were to not use it as an assessment tool, it is essentially just a list of best practices, a list of key developmental experiences that will make your program a high quality program. So if you just read through all of the level 5 indicators in the program quality assessment tool, it's a list of best practices. When we do use it as an assessment tool, it is something that allows us to measure growth and change and progress over time. So in our annual cycle, we're measuring from fall and spring. And then we also have the ability, if you do this for several years, to put your annual data next to each other to view growth and change throughout the years. So here we have our famous pyramid of program quality. So the pyramid of program quality is a visualization of best practices for out-of-school time programming. And we're going to be zooming into this a little bit more, but this is kind of the overview of it. But it is shaped like a pyramid because the things on the bottom have to be in place before you can move up the pyramid. So you need to have a strong foundation in a safe environment. So kids need to feel safe and supported before they're going to be able to do really high level engagement things like plan and reflect. And so this is also a visualization of the PQA tool itself. So these 4 tiers here, they call them domains. I like to think of them as chapters. They're kind of like chapters in our tool. So the first few pages of the tool are measuring safe environment. The next few pages are measuring supportive environment, and so on. So these are our domains or our chapters. When we zoom in a little bit more on our pyramid of program quality, we also see some of the specific things within each domain. So these are kind of like the pages. So if the domains are like chapters, they call them scales. I like to think these are just your page names. So there's a page measuring emotional safety. There's a page measuring warm welcome. There's a page measuring leadership, and so on. And then within each page, there's a few different items. So this is what a page of the tool would look like. So you can see what domain or chapter we're in up in the corner. And then the scale or the page name here is belonging. And then each page or scale has a few items. So this page has 2 items. Some of the scales or pages have 5 or 6 items. One we're looking at has 2. And you can see there's a level 1 indicator. So a 1 typically means that thing was not observed at program that day. That doesn't mean it never happens. It's going to be just for the observation day that we're scoring. So a 1 means that thing was probably not in place. A 3 is the item kind of happened. It was in place to a certain extent. And a 5 means that the item occurred and was done at a best practice level. So when you're scoring, there's a little box you can put your score in, and then there's a spot to put your supporting evidence. And we'll talk all about how to collect that evidence and do your observations. Any questions on the program quality assessment tool or its layout so far? All right, we are going to keep moving. So there are a few different types of assessments you can do. Many of you will be doing self-assessments, which is where someone at your program, ideally it's a team of people, You're observing your own program. So you sit and you watch program for a day. You are not teaching that day. You're not facilitating that day. You are sitting and observing a day of program. And you are writing down everything you're hearing and seeing that's happening in program. And we're going to talk more about how to do that. So you're observing program, you're taking notes. Once you've observed program and taken notes on your program day, you will sit down and score the program quality assessment tool. We'll talk more about how to do that. And then we have a data management system called Scores Reporter that you enter your scores into, and that allows us to spit out a really beautiful data report that you'll get to use at Planning with Data. So for the self-assessment, ideally, you have a team of people so you can kind of break up the program day. So maybe one person observes the first 30 minutes of program, and the next person observes the second 30 minutes of program, and so on. Ideally, you want a full day captured between all of the observers. If needed, you can also break it up between days. So maybe on Monday, Trudy observes the first 30 minutes of program. And then on Tuesday, Harper observes the second 30 minutes of program. And then Wednesday, Tracy observes the next 30 minutes of program, as long as you're capturing a full program day. And then you would all get together and score PQA tool together. I also know some of you have really small programs. Some of you are a 1 or 2 person show. So sometimes it might come down to one person doing the whole assessment. But you can also get creative too and pull in parents, or if you have older youth, that can be a great way to get some perspective and some more objective eyes as well. The other option is an external assessment. And so this is where someone who has been certified reliable with the Weichert Center, who's been trained in the program quality assessment tools comes. So that would be someone like I could come out to program. I would watch a day of program, sit in the corner, type everything I'm seeing, everything I'm hearing. Then I go home or go back to my hotel or wherever I'm staying, and then I score the PQA tool. And then I would take care of putting your scores into Scores Reporter. Ideally, the next day, the external assessor sits down with the program staff that they observed and debriefs scores and everything that they saw. And then your scores would be ready for planning with data from there. I know some of you like Fairbanks, you have Jennifer on your staff who's an external assessor, so she'll be doing all of your assessments, I'm assuming, as usual. So some of you may have external assessors on staff, and some of you may not. So I know there's going to be a mix of self and external assessments across you all. If you have questions about which one your program's going to be doing in which season, let me know. I will share, due to some funding changes at the network, we have a little bit less capacity to do these than in previous years, and we're still kind of figuring out what that looks like. So I know a couple of you are kind of waiting on an answer of, are you coming this fall or not? I will get back to you ASAP, I promise. Questions on self or external assessments? Okay. So how to do these assessments, or how to do your observation, I should say. So again, you're observing a full day of program. One possible, you want to capture that entire session. So you want the beginning from when students arrive, because there's items on, are youth greeted? Are there any icebreakers or things like that happening? So you want to really make sure they're in the beginning. And then the end is a lot of times when reflection happens, and then everything in between. So you really want to make sure, again, that that whole day is encapsulated. I mentioned you can break it up between staff. You can have, like I was describing, one person do the first chunk of program, the next person do the next chunk of program. So staggering those times can happen. And what you're doing is you're writing down as much as you can about what you're seeing and what you're hearing. That can seem like a daunting task. I will say the more familiar you are with what's in the tool, it kind of gives you a cue and an idea of what actually needs to be written down, because it's not possible to capture every single thing. But when you know what you're looking for, you know what to be taking notes on. One tip that I think is super helpful, the vast majority of these items are about what's happening between staff and youth. So staff quotes are critically important. So if you're capturing most of what staff is saying, that's going to be your best bet. And then there's just a few items that speak to really what students are saying, but capturing what staff is saying is super helpful. Um, for your observation days, you want it to be a very normal day. Don't pick a day when there is a field trip or guest speakers, because this is about staff practices. You don't want to be scoring whoever your presenter is that day. So a normal day of program, this says at least 4 youth attending. I think it used to say 10, but Alaska is very small, and I know some of you have very small programs, so just whatever a typical day looks like for you. It also says avoid unstructured time, such as snack, free play, open gym. This is really speaking to if it's the full day. If you have a full day of open gym, there's a lot of items about structured activities that that's not going to capture. If snack or open gym is just a portion of your day, I would include it because there are some good things that you can score on the tool that happen during that time. You just don't want that to be your whole day. So I know some programs start their day with snack and gym and then go into their structured activities. Include all of that time because you'll get good stuff from snack and open gym and things like that. Just make sure that's not your whole day. Also, I've already said this a few times, make sure it's a normal day. Don't put on an extra extravagant show for your assessor. We really want this to be a realistic picture of what your program looks like. I think it's like a snapshot in time of what your program looks like. And then ideally your staff are involved in this process, so hopefully they'll know this is happening, but just make sure they know when it's an assessment day. Even though this is like a no stakes assessment, being observed can sometimes be stressful. Just the whole idea of assessment can seem intimidating. So just being transparent, letting people know whether it's an external assessor or others that they're going to be assessed or observed that day. So some of you may remember this from the full 6-hour training, but what we're going to do next is a quick practice activity. Oh, wait, next slide. First, we're going to look at what notes look like, and then we're going to do a practice activity. So when you're taking your notes, usually I sit in the corner on my laptop, try to stay out of the way. And I'm just, again, typing down everything I'm seeing and hearing. You want your notes to be factual and objective. So you want to avoid making assumptions, stating opinions. You want to, again, what you're seeing and what you're hearing. You want them to be detailed, focusing on interactions. Again, if you're capturing what's happening between staff and youth, that is going to be the key. Quotes are wonderful. I also love sharing quotes back when I'm debriefing with people because they're like, "Whoa, I said that." So quotes are really, really powerful for scoring the tool. Ideally, your notes could stand alone. So like you could take your notes and hand them off to someone else to score the tool. I'll say when I'm taking my own notes and scoring the tool myself, I wouldn't be able to hand them off. They would need a lot of cleaning up because I have shorthand and my own little things that I know I use for scoring. But if I were to be handing them off, you want them to be in a way that someone else would be able to follow. Notes can look a lot of different ways. I know the Weichert Center sometimes suggests a T chart. So on your page, you would draw a T, and then one side is what are you seeing? What are you hearing? For myself personally, mine ends up looking more like a script or a playwright. It's like staff, what they said, youth, what they said, staff, what they said. So you just kind of got to figure out what works for you. And you can kind of come up with your own tricks as you go. For me, when I know something's going to be for a certain item, I'll highlight it in a certain color and put a little thing next to it, like, oh, that was a reflection. So the more you do it, the easier it gets. So again, the key here is being objective, so avoiding opinions, assumptions, being too vague, summaries. Sometimes interactions happen really fast and you can't capture everything that was said. A summary is better than nothing. Quotes are the gold star, so summary is still better than nothing. And really, what you want your notes to be able to do is answer the question, how do you know? So say I had a note, youth were doing this craft and they all had a great time. If you were to ask, how do you know? I would want my notes to be able to answer that question. So I just said they had a great time. That's an assumption I made based on what I saw. I want to be writing down what I saw that led me to that conclusion. So a better note than all youth had a great time would be something like all youth were laughing and smiling throughout the activity. So laughing and smiling as opposed to had a great time. Is that making sense? Any questions on objective notes? Okay, now we're going to get to our practice activity. So on the next slide, there is going to be a black and white image, and you are going to have 1 minute to write down as much of what you're seeing as you can, as objectively as possible. And then we're going to debrief after. So this is your chance to practice taking objective notes. So if you need to pull up a Word document or grab a pen and paper, now's a great time to do that. For this activity, it's great if you're actually writing or typing something down as opposed to just taking mental notes, because this is how we're practicing for observing program. All right, if you're ready, give me a thumbs up, an emoji, something or another, and then I will start the timer and change the slide. Great. And go. Twenty more seconds. All right, pens down. All right, I would like a couple brave people to read from their notes for me. And I might pick on you a little bit depending what you wrote.
I will if you want.
All right, go ahead, Tracy. Thank you.
Put down that I see people, mostly adults and one infant, either on a bus or in a station that looks like a bus station or train station, one of the two. Some of them are just sitting and waiting like they're writing, and that there are two adults that appear to be having a animated discussion, and at least one or two of the other people sitting down look like they are watching that discussion, and it looks like it might be a, a beginning of an argument, possibly, from the look on one of their face and the other one with their finger in the face.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Excellent notes, lots of objective details. I like that you mentioned adults. You mentioned that they appear to be watching them. They look like they're having an animated discussion. You said it looked like they might be starting to get into an argument. And then I would have asked, how do you know? But you answered that question through their body language. I always like to throw in, like, oh, how do we know it's an argument? How do we know, like, he's not booping that person's nose or something? So great job capturing the how do you know part for that.
Thank you.
And then you mentioned it looks like what their location could potentially be. Awesome job, Tracy. All right, can I get another brave volunteer to read your notes?
I do.
All right, Evelyn.
What I observe is like I agree with her, but then I would like to add more with my observation is couple people, the man's reading the newspaper, relaxing, the lady with the hat, she just minding her own business, listening to conversation, and then the other guy at the end, one of them is sleeping, the other one's checking out the baby, and the mom just listening to the conversation with whether their argument and or they're, you know, whatever that conversation is going to lead to, and they are in, you are right, looks like they're in a train station.
Awesome.
And yeah.
Thank you, Evelyn. So, yes, great job describing what people are doing here or what they appear to be doing. I'm going to pick on you a tiny bit here. So, you said one of them is reading a newspaper. How do you know that he's reading the newspaper? How many times have you walked into a room of kids holding books? How many of them are reading? So, that would be, um,
But
he could be hiding from his ex-wife over here or something.
I was also observing, you know, that person's reading. You can see it's like, it looks like a newspaper that, you know, it's a man. You know, if it's like kids, you know, it's going to be a book or a magazine. Or if it's a lady.
Yeah. Yeah. So great job describing. He's got a newspaper. He's looking down at the newspaper. And then the other one I like to point out too is this guy sleeping. He could be praying. We're not sure. How could we describe this guy without saying that he's sleeping?
Hands folded, eyes closed, chin down, just describing what you're seeing. When I used to chart in psych, because I used to moonlight for years in psych, we would, at the very bottom, we would have a place to put our assessment, but you would just write what you see and don't assume anything.
Yep. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so I think we touched on there's always a few little jokes we can make about how do we know? Because we kind of make up stories about people when we see things. So is everyone kind of getting the idea of objective versus assuming? I know a black and white cartoon photo is very different than program, especially if you're observing your own program. There may be some things that you can assume. Like in this photo, sometimes I'll bring up, like, are we assuming their gender identity based on how we're describing them? In your own program, there's a pretty good likelihood you'll know what gender your students are, and you'll know their interaction. So real life is obviously very different than a black and white photo, but this is really just to bring home the point of how to be objective versus subjective and not making assumptions or opinions in your notes. Any
Erin, can
question?
I ask a question?
Yep.
How would you, when I look at the two central figures that are standing, I see one that seems more aggressive, again, and then while one is seems like need to be passive or diffusing. If you weren't hearing what they're having to say and you're watching this, is that a valid thing to bring up in your observation? The position of body? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So I guess the answer would be the how do you know part. So I guess the word aggressive might be considered an assumption. So I would say, how do you know? So that could be in the body language, it could be in the face, it could be in like he had scrunched eyes and his finger in somebody else's face. That could lead you to an assumption, of course. And then part of, the scoring and debriefing with staff like then is going to be, and you're going to hear this throughout the YPQI cycle. This is more about the conversation than the scores. So you're making these observations. You're also having a discussion about it. So it isn't the end all be all that you wrote down that this person's doing this. It'll probably come out later that like, oh yes, they were in fact having a fight or whatever the context is. Also in this picture, like you said, this is a still picture. If we had more context with sound and this was a moving character, we would certainly get a lot more data that could potentially validate the argument, or whatever the interaction might be. And we'd ideally have quotes that would lead us to that conclusion. Does that help answer?
It does, thank you. It just so much of what we do observe is that physical response of people, and not always, especially with students, you can't always hear. That's which is what came to mind with that. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that is a great point too. You can't always hear everything that's happening. But yeah, the key is answering that question, the how do you know? All right, so we just did the recap on how to take notes objectively, how to conduct the observation part of your assessment. So we've observed program, we typed or we wrote all of our notes. Now it's time to sit down and have our scoring meeting. So we are going to do a quick scoring practice. So just a refresher on what the layout is. So we're in the domain or chapters interaction, the scale where the page is belonging, and we've got 2 items on this page. So the 1, again, is the lowest score, which means that thing probably didn't happen during program that day. 3, it kind of happened. 5, it fully happened. And the 5 is the best practice. That is what we strive for. But again, it's not about the score, it's about the conversation. Sometimes people will score 1 and then we'll get, in conversations it'll come up as like, well, we usually do that thing, it just didn't happen today. That's totally fair. For this observation, it scores a 1. That just means when you go to set your goals, maybe you don't have to set a goal in that area just because you had an off day that one day. It's your own data to make your own meaning of. So again, it's more about the conversation than the scores themselves. But we do still want to score everything unless there's a couple items in the tool that say like X is an option if that thing didn't apply to program. So one of them is about outdoor spaces being supervised. If you didn't go outside that day, you could score it an X and it'll tell you on the tool, you may score this item with an X. Otherwise, we really want to score all items. Where I usually like to start is, checking what page we're on. Okay, we're thinking about belonging. Youth have opportunities to develop a sense of belonging. And then I always start with the level 5 indicator. I read, okay, staff provide structured opportunities with the purpose of helping youth get to know each other. Team building activities, introductions, personal updates, welcomes, icebreakers. And then I go to my notes and I say, okay, where did I see any of these things happening in program? So the first step is going to be matching your notes to an item. It's anything from your notes that happened pertain to this item. So let's say I had a note that said, the staff started the session by facilitating 2 icebreakers, all of my neighbors and 2 truths and a lie. So I was able to match some of my observational notes to this item. The next step would be scoring this item. So we want to look through the level 1, level 3, and level 5 indicator and decide how to score it. So the 1 is staff does not provide opportunities for youth to get to know each other. The 3 is staff provides informal opportunities for youth to get to know each other, such as informal conversations or byproducts of an activity. Or a 5, staff provides structured opportunities with the purpose of helping youth get to know each other. And then it gives some examples. So either in the chat or a show on hands, how would you score this note? Staff started the session by facilitating 2 icebreakers, all of my neighbors and 2 truths and a lie. All right, I'm seeing lots of 5s. What is our reason for scoring a 5?
The icebreakers were structured and it wasn't just let's sit and talk. It was we're going to play this one and then we're going to play this one.
Excellent. Thanks, Barbara. So yes, for the items, you really want to differentiate what makes a 1, what makes a 3, what makes a 5. So what is the tipping point? You'll notice there's no 2s and no 4s because there's always kind of pretty clean cut differentiators. So the 1, the staff provided no opportunities. The 3 is informal opportunities such as talking. And then a 5 is a structured opportunity. And it even lists here examples, icebreakers, personal updates, etc.
So Erin, because I put a 3 because it doesn't have any notes about teacher interaction with the students, so we don't really know if anybody was excluded or not excluded. So would that be a 3 or would that be a 5?
Okay, great. Great thing you're pointing out here, Tracy. So the note I put here, the staff started the session by facilitating 2 icebreakers. So really, this is really just kind of an okay note. Ideally, my actual note would have a quote from the staff saying, everyone gather around, we're going to do an icebreaker. And then we could put that quote here. This was kind of a summary quote that I just came up with for the sake of this training. But okay, can you re-ask the second part of your question, Tracy? I want to make sure I'm answering the full thing.
Just if that particular observation, if it would be a 3 or a 5 on the rating scale, because we're not really sure once the teacher invited everybody to join in whether or not there was any exclusion going on.
Yes. Okay. Great, great, great. So this would score a 5. The majority of these items are about staff providing the opportunity. It's not about how youth behaved. It's not about how many actually came. If the opportunity was provided, it would score a 5.
Okay.
They know you did participate, or there's a lot of behaviors, or you know, I don't know, something else crazy happened. This item could still score a 5. Likely, if something like that happened, though, it would be captured somewhere else in the tool. So there's an item on exclusion where that would be captured later, or
Okay.
other items about belonging or feeling connected to the program, things like that. But if the opportunity was provided, the opportunity was provided. Great question. Other questions? All right, let's try one more. So reading our level 5 indicator, youth do not exhibit any exclusion or staff successfully intervenes if exclusive behavior occurs. Now we can think back, do we have any notes about exclusion or inclusion? And then say I have this interaction that I recorded from my observational notes. Youth 1 says, you can't sit with us. Staff says, snack time is free seating. She can sit there if she wants. Youth 1 puts her legs up to prevent Youth 2 from sitting at her table. Youth 2 goes and sits at another table. Staff says nothing else. So now I want to look through what's a 1. A 1 is youth exhibit evidence of excluding peers, and staff does not explicitly promote more inclusive relationships. A 3, youth exhibit some evidence of excluding peers, and staff intervenes, but not sufficiently enough to end the exclusion. And our 5, youth do not exhibit any exclusion, or staff successfully intervenes if exclusive behavior occurs. I'm seeing some scores rolling into the chat here. Does anyone like to share why they're scoring what they scored? Seeing lots of 3s. I see a 1.
I put a 1 as I do not feel that the staff did not respond appropriately to the exclusion of the peer. The behavior was kind of condoned because no one prevented it.
I see. Yeah, sometimes we don't like what we see. And I will say that even sometimes we don't like what we see, but according to the tool, it technically would score a 3, even though it can feel yucky to give something higher than a 1 when a negative interaction like that occurs. If we really read into the words and the language in the descriptors, it will technically score a 3 because the staff did intervene and tell her it's free seating, she can sit there, but it was not sufficient to end the exclusion. So even though it feels yucky, it's still a 3. And then, of course, again, it's more about the conversation than the score. So during the scoring meeting or during the debrief with the staff, I mean, hopefully it would come out like, hey, more needs to be done to prevent this and address it in the future. or hopefully they would come to that conclusion themselves after reading the notes and the score. So our differentiators for this one, we saw, so the one was exclusion happened, no intervention. A 3 is exclusion happened, some intervention, but not enough intervention. And then a 3 is no exclusion or successful intervention if there was exclusion. So no 2s or 4s. Sometimes, like say I observe a program and I didn't see any sort of exclusive behavior, it can be kind of hard to like find that in your notes. So sometimes I'll write like no exclusion observed. And then I usually try to find a couple notes or quotes about inclusion of like youth invited other youth to play games with them or things like that. So there may be somewhere it's like this was not observed and that's a 5 because it's like there might not be specific notes to it. But usually I try to find something that informs why that is a 5. Okay, so yes, first one was a 5, second one was a 3. So once you've observed your program, took your notes, matched your notes to an item, score the items, then you're going to enter your scores into Scores Reporter, which is our data management system. I just got those from the Weichert Center. They set up all the Scores Reporter accounts. I just got those this week, so I'll be sending out all of your logins, hopefully today or tomorrow. But once you have your scores in the Scores Reporter, it'll create a data report, and then I will provide your data reports for planning with data, which will be that next phase of YPQI. So a few things to consider for your assessments is, thinking through how you'll encapsulate a full day of program. So is that going to be one observation on one day? Is it going to be multiple observation throughout multiple days or multiple observations on a single day? Which offerings will you observe? I know some of you have multiple groups happening at once. So sometimes assessors will kind of bounce between groups, or sometimes you just pick one or two groups. It's really kind of up to you how you want to structure that. Who will do the observing, what coverage is needed, and then when will your scoring meeting be? This says 3 hours. The first time you do this, it might take 3 hours. There's, I don't know, like 50 some items in the tool. So it is a little bit of time. Once you've done this a few times and you kind of know what you're looking for in your notes will probably get a little shorter once you really know what you're looking for, which leads to a shorter scoring time. But the first time I would probably budget about 3 hours. What else? Oh, there are also some resources for you, which I will show you. I sent out yesterday, and I'll send it out again after this. Actually, I'll just share the link in the chat to this Google folder. Okay, so that link should bring you to this Google folder that has all the materials you need for doing a youth assessment and a school age assessment. So these two folders have the same materials just for the different age groups. So there is a copy of the program quality assessment tool itself. So scroll down past the first few pages of words, you can see this is what we've just been doing. So we have the tool itself. And this, if you download it, this is fillable. So you could do this all the scoring on the computer if you don't want to print it out. There's also an item summary, which is just a list of all of the items in the tool. When I am out observing, I don't carry the tool with me. It can be really tempting to bring it and like try to pre-score things, but then you get distracted and whatnot. I usually carry just the item summary with me as a reminder of like, oh, do I have any notes on this yet? What do I still need to be looking for? So this is just a really good one pager of what are we looking at. This can also be a really helpful sheet to provide to staff who maybe didn't attend this training, just so they kind of know what is going to be looked at for the observation. And then the third thing in this folder is the handbook. And this is a super helpful tool, especially for scoring. It has a whole overview of this entire process. So if you have new staff that didn't get to attend this training, I am recording this, so you can always send them this, but this goes into a lot of detail. And then it has some practice things I think this is a scramble, so you can practice rearranging items to differentiate between items. But really, well, one, there's this picture of Thomas from the Alaska After School Network, pre-beard. But if you go to the back of this tool, it has a page for every single item, and it talks about the intention of the item, really gives the definition, and it gives some examples. And a lot of times when I'm stumped on scoring something and I open the handbook, the scenario or example that they provide is like so close to what I'm debating over. So a lot of thought has gone into this resource. So this is a really helpful resource if you get stumped on scoring. It's also my job to hold your hand through this process, so please email me, call me, let me know if you need help with any part of this process. Let me go back to my slideshow. Any question on those resources? Okay, and I know some of you may be newer and maybe didn't get a chance to do the full 6-hour version of this and you want a little more practice or need a recap of how it all works. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to meet with you or do a quick version of this training with your staff. Whatever is needed, I am your resource. I also, I'll be sending out the Scores Reporter logins this week. Scores Reporter, it's pretty straightforward, but sometimes it's not always the most user-friendly. I don't want Scores Reporter to be a stressor for you. I am more than happy to enter your scores for you. If Scores Reporter stresses you out, you can just send them to me. So please use me as a resource. Okay, so we just went through the whole assess phase of the Youth Program Quality Initiative process. We'll do a quick 1, 3, 5 reflection. A 1 is I'm lost or overwhelmed. A 3 is I'm starting to get it, need a little more time. Or a 5 is I get it, I'm ready to do an assessment tomorrow. Maybe not tomorrow, but seeing a mix here, 3s, 5s. If anyone's feeling a 1, please feel free to reach out to me. I want to set you up for success. Oh, super important detail I don't want to leave out. Try to do your assessment by the end of October because we need your data to be able to prepare for the planning with data workshops. So from now to the end of October, if you can try and get your assessment in. All right. And am I screen sharing? Yes. Okay. So our last slide, I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes if you have any questions. And then QR code for just a quick eval. We're all about quality improvement, of course, so we have our eval so we can continue to improve ourselves in this process for you. Linda, good questions. Yes, they remake your logins every year. So yes, I will send you your new random combination of numbers and letters as your login.
I had a question. kind of specific to us about planning with data. I have a new um like site supervisor this year. Katie's left, but I've replaced her with Juliet, who is fantastic. But this will be her first year with this assessment. And the first year that we were ever programmed 2 years ago, we came to planning with data in person for that pre-conference day that I found super helpful. But last year we did it online because we'd already kind of been through it before and we felt like online was a better way to go. Do you recommend that Juliet and I take the same planning with data session? Or like, can I send her in person for pre-conference and I can take it online in December?
Yes, great question. This is also great context for the whole group as well. Ideally, you're attending as a team so that you have team buy-in in your goal setting. Um, Ideally, so for the first year, we recommend you attend the 6-hour version of Planning with Data, so either pre-conference or we also offer the 6-hour version online. We also offer a 2-hour version of Planning with Data online for returning teams so that you don't have to take the same 6-hour training every single year. Barbara, I will kind of leave that up to you if you think that would be valuable for Juliet to kind of get the full picture. Definitely come to the 6-hour version. Or if you feel like she's pretty filled in and in tune with the process, totally up to you.
Okay, thanks. I'll think about it.
Yep. And then on that note too, we will not be offering the 2-hour version at conference this year. The 2-hour version will only be online this year. Other questions? I'll be sending out planning with data registration information in the next few weeks here as well. So you all might want to touch base with your teams, decide what one you might want to go to. All right. I will stay on for a few more minutes, but other than that, that's all I have for you. So thank you all for being here. It's good to see so many of you I haven't seen in a while. And have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, Erin.
Erin, thank you for letting me join today since I missed it last week.
Oh,
The
yeah.
only question I have is for the Anchorage School District 21st Century Program, the Christine evaluations. Does Christine observe us for this, or do we do the site observations for this?
So yeah, for this, all the ASD coordinators do a self-assessment.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I don't know, I don't know if we've met before. I used to be a 21st century coordinator too, so I'm very familiar with your program. I was at Russian Jack.
That's where I am currently.
Okay, so I was at my old office. Maybe.